Thank you. You do have some questions. Councillor Woodsworth is first in line.
Thank you for being here, and I'm wondering who invited you to come and present before us today.
I invited myself, if that's all right.
Oh, absolutely. We're very happy to. I gather UFC let you know that this was coming before us, and that it would be helpful if you spoke to it.
Sure. No. Well, I've been paying attention to the debates. As you know, I like to think I'm doing my job of paying attention to the big debates that are before the City of Vancouver as the Vancouver minister. But it's a fair question. But I'm here on my behalf and as the minister responsible for Vancouver.
On behalf of the citizens of Vancouver, I'm curious then why Bill C-31, which would relieve us all of a lot of the headaches that we're addressing today, has not moved past first reading. That would be my priority for you to work on as our federal minister.
I don't disagree with you, but as you can appreciate, we are operating in Ottawa in a minority parliament situation. There are lots of pieces of legislation, C-31 notwithstanding, that we would have liked to have seen passed many months ago. Bill C-31 is before the Parliament, and we'd like to have it passed, but that requires the support of one of the three opposition parties, which we do not now have. But C-31 should not, I say respectfully, should not in any way prevent this Council from going forward and passing the motion and the recommendation of the VAC. Bill C-31.
Just to clarify,
yeah.
So C-31 is not supported by the Liberals, the Bloc, or the NDP?
Well, we put it forward for first reading, and we're still looking for support in order to bring it forward and to pass it further.
And what's that opposition?
Frankly, you'd have to ask them.
Okay, and clearly you're thinking that the...
But their opposition, sorry to interrupt, their opposition is not related to this topic. Their opposition is related to the overall nature of the legislation, I would suspect. The issue of mixed martial arts has not been raised in the federal parliament as any concern whatsoever of any of the opposition parties.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Deal.
Thank you very much. We're here. Thanks. And thank you for coming out today. It's very useful for us to have you here stating clearly on the record the federal government's position. That is a big piece of our concern. The questions have basically been asked, which is, you know, the 2-year period of time is partly in place because we want to have all those other pieces of legislation nailed down before we make it a permanent sanctioning. So hopefully you'll be able to get that through within 2 years.
Yes, well, hopefully many things can happen in the next 2 years, including that. Yes.
Oh, all right. So I appreciate that, and I just wanted to know if you're just jealous because Port Moody doesn't have an arena large enough.
We're working on it. That's exactly right.
Thank you.
That's exactly right. So.
Thank you, Councillor Deal, I think.
Yes.
Councillor Anton.
Mr. Minister, thank you for coming today. Appreciate you being here. Come again.
Yes.
On the issue of C-31 and the actual technical language in C-31, I gather it deals with amateur, not necessarily professional. I know that our city manager expressed some concern before you got here about the language in it, and I guess this would just be a request that your Department of Justice staff would work with our staff to make sure that it covers all the things that our legal department thinks it needs to be covered. Gladly.
And any concerns that have been raised, we'd be glad to do that. Keep in mind, by the way, as we know, on a number of issues in Canada, there's jurisdictional overlap and uncertainty. We have this, for example, on a number of issues, from Aboriginal issues to environmental issues to healthcare in this country, where it's a shared and joint and sometimes an unclear responsibility. So, too, is it true with regard to mixed martial arts? As you all know the jurisdictional dynamic in here. Bill C-31 is principally aimed at the concerns that have been raised by the province of Ontario, not by the City of Vancouver. The City of Vancouver obviously will be part of the debate as that legislation goes forward. But there's a disagreement in the province of Ontario alone about the interpretation of the laws, but it's obviously the federal government has no concern whatsoever with regard to mixed martial arts. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been mixed martial arts events going forward.
No, I appreciate that, but the language in the criminal code, speaking as a former prosecutor, when you read it, it's still, it's still there, and it would be very helpful to have it changed. So I think it would make everybody more comfortable were it to be changed. Really appreciate your support and your pushing for that, and I know you've been an advocate for this for some time, and I hope you'll be at the first event. I hope we'll approve it today, and we'll hope to see you at the first event in Vancouver.
Sadly.
Thank you, Councillor Anton. Councillor Reimer.
Thanks for coming today, Minister. I can only imagine what your schedule's like relative to the ones we have, which are already pretty busy. You had said that we should embrace a sport that our constituents have embraced, a majority. Do you have polling data to that regard?
No, I'm not polling down to that regard, but I think it's pretty overwhelmingly clear in the analysis that have been done by Zuffa, which is the parent company of the UFC. They've, I think the euphemism they described is that Canada is the mecca of mixed martial arts. But look, let me put it this way. Canada is a country that has always been on the leading edge of sport development. We always have been. We're the country that invented hockey. We invented basketball. It was lacrosse that bound First Nations and non-First Nations together through the War of 1812. Canada is a country that has always embraced sport as an opportunity. We always have. And I think our opportunity on mixed martial arts here is something that we should not miss.
Okay, well, I thought it was an interesting argument. Someone earlier had mentioned marijuana, which, of course, we are, in fact, the mecca of marijuana use here in Vancouver. So if that were the argument, I was wondering if your government was interested in moving on that issue. I'm not as up on federal procedures, but you had said that the government, and specifically that terminology, had not directed any action against the Montreal events. And I'm not familiar enough with who would direct that action. Is it the minority government, a majority of parliament, or the police, or who acts on the criminal code?
Well, the RCMP do. If there was any, if there was opposition to mixed martial arts, for example, in the city of Montreal, and somebody said they're doing something that goes against the criminal code, that would be reported to the RCMP. The RCMP would do an investigation, and they would lay charges, and they would prevent the event from going forward. That didn't happen. It didn't happen because clearly there's no sense that the spirit of the law, and what will now be debated through C-31, the letter of the law, the spirit of the law is not intended to deny UFC and mixed martial arts from taking place in Canada.
So I guess to my question then, it's neither the Parliament nor the government's purview once it's gotten in the criminal code to intervene.
Correct. We do not direct the RCMP. In the past, some politicians have been rumored to try that, and it didn't go well.
I may have heard that as well. But I guess one could reasonably assume that a citizen wouldn't understand that they could make such a complaint given that there was a sanctioned event in a large arena happening. I mean, it'd be like me complaining about a Canucks game and saying it was illegal, for example.
Because of a fight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one could make a reasonable inference that citizens of Montreal may not have been aware that this gray area exists.
The citizens of Montreal may not have been aware the first time, but they certainly would have been made aware after the event, and going into the second time, they were certainly enthusiastic, and now they're going into their third event, and no such concerns have been raised because it was such a success.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are your questions. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.